the tower that reached for heaven, the lost story of Babel. Have you ever heard of a tower so tall it could touch the heavens themselves? A structure that challenged the divine, that united all humanity in one purpose, until a single moment of confusion shattered it all? This is the story of the Tower of Babel, a story not only of ambition and punishment, but of unity, pride, and a forgotten science that may have once changed the course of human history. The dawn of ambition. Long before steel, electricity, or even written history as we know it, there was a land, Shinar, the heart of ancient Mesopotamia. Here, under the scorching sun and between the twin rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, a dream was born. It began not with kings, but with whispers of a people who had survived the great flood, still haunted by the waters that once swallowed the earth. They wanted more than safety. They wanted immortality through achievement. And so, united by one language, one purpose, and one unbreakable desire, they began to build something the world had never seen before, a tower that would reach the very gates of heaven. But this wasn't just a pile of bricks and mud. This was a monument to humanity itself, a declaration that mankind could rise to meet the divine, the clay and the fire. According to ancient records, they didn't use stone like the Egyptians, nor marble like the Greeks who would come centuries later. They used clay, the dust of the earth, molded by hand. But here lies the secret. This wasn't ordinary clay. It was refined, heated, transformed in fire hotter than any forge of its age. They burned their bricks in massive ovens, reaching over 800 degrees Celsius, nearly 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, until the clay turned as hard as stone. Each brick was then coated in a dark, tar-like substance called bitumen, a natural asphalt that oozed from the earth itself. It was sticky, resilient, and when combined with fire-baked bricks, it created a bond stronger than modern cement. Imagine it, a civilization 4,000 years ago, crafted materials that could withstand pressures of thousands of kilograms, building upwards into the clouds without steel, cranes, or machines. Could they have truly done it? Modern experiments suggest they could. Scientists recreated these ancient methods, and the results stunned them. The same clay, burned as the ancients described, could withstand over 3,000 kilograms of pressure per brick. With that strength, a tower over 2,400 meters tall wasn't just possible. It was inevitable. The kingdom of Nimrod. At the heart of this colossal project stood a single figure, Nimrod, the great-grandson of Noah. Scripture calls him a mighty hunter before the Lord. But ancient texts describe him as something far greater, a ruler with unmatched ambition, obsessed with preventing another flood from ever destroying his people again. To Nimrod, the tower was not merely a monument of pride. It was a fortress, a refuge that no storm could ever reach. If the heavens opened again, his people would be safe above the waters. If the gods descended, they would meet him at the top. It was the ultimate challenge and the ultimate insurance against divine wrath. The city that never slept. For 43 years, the tower rose in the desert like a mountain of fire and dust. Over 100,000 men and women worked day and night in perfect harmony. They spoke one language, shared one vision, and lived for one purpose: to complete the tower. Work never stopped, not for the Sabbath, not for holy days, not even for death. When one fell, another took his place. Every brick carried on a shoulder was a step closer to eternity. Food was baked around the clock, 3 meals a day for 100,000 laborers. Water from the Euphrates was hauled up by donkeys and slaves. The sound of hammers, chants, and songs of labor echoed across the plains, a symphony of unity unlike anything the world had seen since Eden. But the cost was steep. Every day, 10 workers died, crushed by bricks, burned by fires, or lost to exhaustion. By the time the tower reached its 7th level, over 150,000 lives had been given. Blood had become the mortar of Babel, the 7 levels of the heavens. The tower was not hollow. It was a living city spiraling upward, each level serving a different purpose. At the base were storerooms, filled with food, water, and the tools of the builders. Above that were living quarters, where the foremen and their families resided. Then came the workshops, blacksmiths, carpenters, and potters, each crafting what the next level needed. The sixth floor was sacred, home to temples and ritual chambers, where women danced in firelit circles, praying for the gods' favor and protection. And at the very top, the observatory. Priests studied the stars, mapping the heavens to align their work with divine constellations. Each level shimmered with bitumen, so polished that the torchlight reflected off its walls like black mirrors. When the sun rose, the tower glowed like obsidian against the sky, a mountain built by human hands. The moment of confusion. Then came the day that changed everything. It started like any other morning. Workers climbed the ramps, singing their chants, carrying bricks up to clouds. But at one moment, something strange happened. A foreman shouted an order, and his helper just stared confused. The words made no sense. Another worker yelled, but his friend didn't understand either. Voices began to clash, commands turned into chaos, and within minutes, the perfect rhythm of construction fell apart. Confusion spread like wildfire. Arguments turned into panic. Accidents followed. Ropes snapped, bricks fell, and hundreds were crushed in the turmoil. It was as if an invisible hand had torn their minds apart. And in that instant, the unity of mankind was broken. Where once there was one voice, now there were many. The people of Babel could no longer understand one another. Families, friends, builders, all divided by words that no longer made sense. Within days, the grandest construction in human history stood silent. The Tower of Babel, abandoned, echoes of heaven. But what truly caused confusion? The book of Genesis says it was God's judgment, a divine act to humble humanity's pride. Yet, some ancient Babylonian tablets tell a slightly different story. They speak of a ritual performed at the top of the tower, a ceremony meant to open a doorway between heaven and earth. Priests and priestesses gathered on a full moon, chanting sacred words, drawing symbols in silver dust, and offering sacrifices upon an altar of gold and obsidian. They believed that at the right height, where heaven's air touched the earth's breath, a portal could be opened, a gateway where gods and mortals might meet. Some say it worked, but something else came through. The stars themselves seemed to tremble. Voices that weren't human whispered in the wind. And when morning came, the people of Babel no longer spoke the same language. Perhaps the confusion of tongues was not punishment, but protection. The vanishing tower. Centuries passed, but what became of the tower? A structure that tall should have left a mountain of ruins. And yet, archaeologists have found almost nothing. Some say it fell in an earthquake, but there's no geological evidence. Others believe it was dismantled brick by later civilizations. But where are those 600 million bricks? They're nowhere to be found. Then there are the whispers of a fire from heaven, a divine light that consumed the tower in a single night, leaving not dust, not stone, but nothing. The Tower of Babel simply vanished. Legacy of Babel. But the story doesn't end there. For even today, the ruins of Babylon hold secrets of unimaginable complexity. The chemistry of their bricks, the precision of their construction, and the echoes of a language now lost. All speak of a people who once united under one dream. The Tower of Babel was not only a monument to pride, it was a testament to what humanity can achieve when we are united, and a warning of what happens when we reach too high, too fast, without understanding what waits above. Because perhaps they did touch heaven, and heaven answered. Closing reflection. Maybe God's act wasn't punishment, but mercy. A divine reminder that the power to create and destroy lies not in our hands, but in our hearts. And so, the Tower of Babel stands, not in stone but in memory, a symbol carved in time, of unity lost, languages born, an eternal question that still echoes across the ages. What truly happened at the top of the tower? The Tower of Babel, inside the ambition of humanity. As the sun rose over the ancient plains of Shinar, the golden light shimmered across a vast expanse of fertile land. The people who had come there were not wanderers anymore. They were builders, determined, ambitious, united. Their hearts burned with one desire, to make a name for themselves. The flood of Noah was now a distant memory. Generations had passed, and humanity had begun to thrive once again. They spoke a single language, every sound, every word, every thought flowed in harmony. Communication was perfect. There were no barriers, no misunderstandings. In that unity, they found strength. But beneath that unity, something darker began to grow: pride. They gathered in the valley, and one man, whose name has long been lost to time, raised his hand and said, "Come, let us build a city and a tower that reaches the heavens. Let us not be scattered across the earth, but let our name endure forever." The idea spread like wildfire. The people cheered. They imagined a monument that would pierce the sky, a structure so grand that even the heavens would take notice. They believed that together they could do anything. They began to work. Clay was molded into bricks, each one carefully baked in the sun. The people of Shinar had learned to use bitumen, a thick, tar-like substance, to bind their bricks together. It was a new technology, a breakthrough that made their dreams seem possible. Unlike the stones of the old world, these bricks could be shaped to fit perfectly, stacked higher and stronger than ever before. Soon, the sound of construction filled the air. The thud of hammers, the rhythm of footsteps, the chants of laborers echoed through plain. Smoke from countless kilns drifted into the sky. The foundation was laid, wide, deep, and strong. The tower began to rise, one layer at a time. From the base, it looked like a mountain made by human hands. Spiral ramps wound around its edges, carrying workers, tools, and supplies upward. Every level had chambers carved into its walls, storage for food and water, resting places for laborers, and even shrines where they offered sacrifices to the heavens. The people believed that this tower would be more than a monument. It would be a gateway between earth and sky, a place where humans could meet the divine on their own terms. As the tower grew taller, it became a symbol of human unity, ingenuity, and pride. Families worked side by side. Architects drew blueprints in sand. Leaders gave speeches about destiny and greatness. Songs were written, celebrating their progress. Children played in the shadow of the ever-rising structure, dreaming of touching the clouds one day. But up above, in the unseen realm, God watched. He saw the harmony, but he also saw the arrogance. He saw that humankind had forgotten the lessons of the flood, that without humility, even unity could lead to destruction. One morning, as the builders gathered, something strange began to happen. A mason turned to ask his partner for a brick, but his partner looked confused. The words came out differently, garbled, unrecognizable. Another worker shouted instructions, but no one understood. Panic spread across the site. Within moments, the harmony shattered. Voices clashed in 1,000 different sounds. Groups began to form, each understanding only their own tongue. Misunderstandings led to anger. Anger led to chaos. The once united builders accused one another of sabotage, of betrayal. Tools were dropped. Work halted. The mighty tower, which had risen so proudly, now stood in eerie silence. And then they scattered. The people left the plains of Shinar in all directions, east, west, north, and south, each tribe carrying with them their new language, their new identity. The tower was abandoned, unfinished, standing as a monument not to human triumph, but to human limitation. Centuries later, travelers would find its ruins and wonder how such a structure could have been built. They would see the base, immense and ancient, covered in vines and dust, and they would tell stories. Some said it was destroyed by fire from heaven. Others said it simply crumbled with time. But all agreed on one thing. It was a moment when humanity's single voice was divided. Yet, even in this judgment, there was mercy. Because though God scattered them, he also gave them diversity, languages, cultures, nations, each one a reflection of boundless creativity. From that day forward, humankind would learn not only the power of unity, but also the beauty of difference. Inside the ruined tower, silence reigned. But if you listen closely, you might still hear the whispers of what once was, the ambition of humanity, echoing through the hollow chambers of Babel. And from that silence began a new chapter of the world's story, one where nations would rise and fall, languages would spread like rivers, and the quest to reach heaven would take on new forms. The Tower of Babel, the echo that still speaks. As the wind swept across the empty plains of Shinar, dust danced where once thousands of footsteps had thundered. The tower stood there, silent, broken, unfinished, a monument not to triumph, but to a truth that humanity would never forget. It was a day when voices multiplied and directions divided, the day when humanity's single heartbeat became a chorus of many, and though their tongues no longer united them, their story still did. Generations passed. The ruins of Babel became a mystery, a whisper carried through centuries. Some called it the Gate of the Gods, others the Gate of Confusion. But no matter the name, its shadow stretched far beyond stone and dust. It became a mirror, reflecting the eternal tension within every human heart. The desire to reach upward and the fear of falling from grace. Because the Tower of Babel wasn't only about a structure of brick and tar. It was a story about us. Every generation has built its own towers, not always from stone, but from ambition, pride, and the longing to be remembered. Our skyscrapers, our empires, our technologies, all rise from the same soil of human aspiration. And just like Babel, they often begin with unity and end with division. But what if that wasn't the end of the story? What if the scattering at Babel was never meant to be punishment, but preparation? God, in his infinite wisdom, did not destroy humanity that day. He didn't send another flood or strike the earth with fire. Instead, he touched their language, the very thing that connected them, and transformed it. What seemed like chaos was, in truth, the birth of diversity. Each tribe that walked away from Babel carried with it a piece of humanity's original song, a rhythm, a pattern, a beauty that would one day reconnect through time. And centuries later it did. Because deep within the story of the Bible, there's another moment, another gathering, where language would once again unite the world. It happened in Jerusalem during the Feast of Pentecost. The disciples of Jesus stood before a crowd, and by the power of the Holy Spirit they spoke, and every nation understood them in their own tongue. It was as if Babel's curse had been reversed, not by the strength of humanity, but by the grace of God. Where pride once divided, love now united. Where confusion reigned, understanding was restored. And where the tower once tried to reach heaven, heaven itself had descended to meet humanity. The story of Babel, then, is not a warning against greatness, but against greatness without God. It reminds us that unity, without humility, leads to collapse. But humility, guided by faith, can build something far stronger, something eternal. The tower fell, but the lesson endured. Perhaps, in a way, the Tower of Babel still stands, not in the plains of Shinar, but within each of us. It's the place where we wrestle with our own pride, our own ambitions, our own need to be seen. We build, we strive, we reach, and sometimes we forget who gave us the hands to build and the hearts to dream. But the same God who scattered humanity also calls us to gather again, not through language or power, but through love. So maybe the true tower that touches heaven isn't built from brick or mortar. Maybe it's built from acts of kindness, moments of forgiveness, whispers of faith, each one stacked upon another until they form a bridge between earth and eternity. The ruins of Babel may have crumbled into dust, but its echo still speaks. It reminds us that every time we reach upward in pride, we fall, but every time we kneel in humility, heaven draws near. And in that stillness, amid the ruins of human ambition, the voice of God still whispers, "Come, let us build together, not a tower of pride, but a kingdom of love." The Tower of Babel began as a monument to human glory, but through it, God revealed a truth that would shape all of history, that only through surrender can humanity rise, and only through faith can heaven be reached.